Well, good morning. Welcome to the University of Missouri, and it's so great to have all of you here for this incredible talk. The purpose of the Distinguished Lecture Series was to invite national leaders to discuss topics of very global significance. And we're so pleased to have with us Dr. Sethuraman Panchanathan, who is the director of the National Science Foundation. And he is here to speak about innovation as well as opportunities in advancing science that benefits society. In many ways, Dr. Panchanathan is a leader for the ages. Not since Vannevar Bush has there been an NSF director that has expanded the possibility, created a paradigm shift to better understand science and engineering and how it applies in practical terms for people living in the world today and people that will be living in the future. So in addition to his talk today, he's going to meet with our faculty, students, and staff to hear about their exciting work. So in many ways, it's a terrific day of discovery here at the university. But before we begin, we have a number of very special guests, and I'd like to ask them to stay standing. Please hold your applause because we have a number of people to recognize. First and foremost, Chair of our board, Michael Williams, Vice Chair, Robin Winokur, Curator Designee, Dr. Jeannie Sinkfield. We also have our General Counsel, Mark Mangini. And we have our chancellors from our universities, Mo Degani from S&T, Molly Agrawal from UMKC, Kristen Sobolik from UMSL. We also have very important leaders, elected leaders that serve our state so well, beginning with Senator Rusty Black, Representative Kent Hayden, Mayor of Columbia, Barbara Buffalo, and we also have the Chief of Staff to our wonderful governor that supports higher ed, Aaron Willard. Aaron? And representing the Congressman Luke DeMeyer, we have Carrie Stewart here as well. Carrie, thank you. Your support for our universities, the 4 universities that are part of our system, higher ed, and the unique research mission is greatly, greatly appreciated. We also have the Chief of Government Affairs, Mr. Moeller, who is joining our distinguished guest today. Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, I would like to ask our provost, Dr. Latha Ramchand, to introduce our distinguished speaker. Dr. Ramchand.
Thank you. Thank you, President Choi. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and good morning. In 1965, an individual by the name of Joseph Sobolchek wrote a book called The Lonely Man of Faith, The Lonely Man of Faith, and maybe some of you have seen that. And in that, this author describes the 2 sides of human nature. Let's call it Joseph 1 and Joseph 2. Joseph 1 is about your accomplishments, your achievements, things you put on your CV. Number of NSF grants you received, maybe, or the number of publications or your Google Scholar Index. Joseph 2 is about the side of our human nature, which has to do with not just being good, but also doing good in a way that touches the lives of other human beings. And as a society, we are tilted generally more towards recognizing, appreciating, rewarding Joseph 1. It's easy to identify. Joseph 2 is rare, and perhaps even rarer is the combination of Joseph 1 and 2. And so I can introduce our speaker to you today as Dr. Sethuraman Panchanathan, computer scientist engineer, Executive Vice President of the Education Enterprise at Arizona State University in a previous role, a fellow of the AAAS, a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors, someone who was appointed by several presidents on several boards, science boards, and of course, currently serves as the director of the prestigious National Science Foundation. And that would be Joseph I, or in this case, Dr. Punch I. But as you know, there's a bigger story here. And when you read about him and you listen to him either talk or be interviewed, thank you, YouTube, you see that this passion to do good come through in such unique ways, right? The passion to do good through the medium of science and technology, but in a way that's not about handing out solutions, but more about empowering others to find their own solutions. If you watched his TEDx talk, you heard about a student of his, David Hayden, who was visually impaired and was in one of his classes at Arizona State, and he came to Dr. Punch and said, I need some help so I can get the full experience of being in this class. And rather than giving him a solution or sending him to the Center for Disabilities, which you so lovely rephrased as the Center for Expanded Abilities earlier this morning, Dr. Punch told David, why don't you find your own solution? Can you create a solution to your own problem? And of course, David did, and created a technology that helped him, but also his classmates who had similar issues. And today, David has graduated with a PhD from MIT and is the founder of a startup which is based on the idea that he incubated at ASU. When you hear Dr. Punch being interviewed by Steve Clements at The Hill, he talks about connectivity, broadband, ubiquitous computing. And those words are not just about computing and technology, but it's really about connecting all parts of our community, rural, urban, bringing people together through technology innovation partnerships, where industry, researchers, universities, the government, foundations, all have a seat, a voice, and a decision at the table. And as he describes it, it's not a situation where one group replaces or dominates the other. It's what he calls additive talent. And he talks about empowering all parts of society, gender disparities in STEM education, and how some of the investments, thanks to the NSF, have resulted in female computer science students taking the AP computer science courses, going from 17,000 students in 2019 to 40,000 students today. But to me, what I found really uplifting was his talk on BBC on the Tamil channel. Now, Tamil, as some of you know, is one of the languages we speak in India. And you hear him talk about, and I'm going to use the Tamil word here, Tirukkural. Tirukkural was a piece of literature written between the 3rd and 4th centuries. It's an amazing piece of work that has relevance to this day. And you talk about, and you hear him talk about the relevance of the Tirukkural and the messages that came out of that great piece of work to the way we live our lives today. You hear him talk about culture, how we need to appreciate the cultures that we were raised in, that we were a part of. It's called Kalacharam in Tamil. But more importantly, the respect we need to have for other cultures. He talks about his upbringing and the importance of seva, which is service, serving others in everything you do. And he talks about how challenges define us. There's not one problem in the world that did not make you a better person, right? So I don't think Joseph Solovchik had Dr. Punch in mind. He was not born, I think, when Solovchik wrote the book. But you see how these two parts of human nature have come together so synergistically in our speaker for today. So colleagues, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sethuraman Panchanathan.
That's amazing. Wow. This is the introduction that I can tell you is probably the most exhaustive introduction of somebody who has done her research really well. So Provost Lata Ramchand, thank you so much. It's an honor to be introduced by you. And I can tell you that when I see this hall filled with people of so many different backgrounds, different orientations, different experiences, imagine this now to be what our nation is empowered, energized, motivated, inspired. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, there is no place on earth that can outcompete our great nation. And so I just want to focus today's talk on this title of Innovation Anywhere and Opportunities Everywhere, and how can we unleash that through our science, technology, innovation, and more activities. Before I get into my talk, such an august attendance here of people of great backgrounds. I want to honor the mayor, the elected representatives, the amazing leaders in the great state of Missouri. And I will tell you, you have an outstanding leader in President Choi. You all know that. He is a leader by action and leader who is really inspiring the way forward. And thank you so much for your service for this nation, working with Provost Ramchand, and then working with the chancellors who I got to meet today, one of whom I knew before, Mauli Agarwal, Chancellor Agarwal, Chancellor Sobolik. It was great to meet you. And then Chancellor Digan, great to meet you too. It is truly an honor to be surrounded by this amazing group of people, amazing leaders who are all about doing and making things happen. I know that Nobel laureate John Smith is here. John, thank you so much. You represent the best of the best of the best our nation takes so much pride in, and NSF takes so much pride in. And what an amazing accomplishment. We honor you, sir, for what you have done and what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And to my dear colleagues from the National Science Board who preceded me. And so great to have you here, and what an honor to be with you. And so thank you so much for your service in the National Science Board. So what I want to dive into is quickly talk about something that I think you all will be able to relate to naturally here in the great state of Missouri, because you are essentially practicing this every day and making things possible every day, which is this concept of innovation anywhere and opportunities everywhere. Let me run quickly through a set of slides, because a director's talk without slides would not be appropriate, would not be thought of as complete. So I have no choice but to do this. So I'm just going to run through this, but I'm going to be a little bit animated. I want the folks in the back there. I don't need a mic. My family tells me that when I have a phone call that they can hear me in the other part of town. I don't need a phone to do that. And I want the folks up there, as I get excited, the volume increases even more. So I usually used to have aspirin for my classes for students not to get this headache that they walk out with. So I just want to walk through the mission of NSF. This was a mission that I celebrate. This was a mission that was laid out 75 years ago, folks, by Vannevar Bush, the great scientist, and eloquently described. And I would not change a word of that mission statement today, not one word of it. In this day and age where mission statements get recreated every 5 years, a new leader comes and says, I need a new mission, a new vision. Here is a vision that stands the test of time, that has guided NSF and will guide NSF for decades to come. And I'm so thrilled to be able to be part of that unbelievable mission of NSF, and grateful to Vannevar Bush for his amazing treatment, Science the Endless Frontier, to President Roosevelt, which then got further the attention of Congress with the NSF Act and signed by President Truman, which made it all real. And remember that it is about securing national defense, national security. It's about economic security. It's about societal progress, but all through science, engineering, technology, and innovation. When I came to NSF 2 years ago, I said NSF has been doing an amazing job, to say the least. John is an exemplar of that. NSF has made possible around 260 Johns, Nobel laureates, over the last 7 decades, in physics, in chemistry, in medicine, biology, as well as in economics. And so clearly NSF has been doing something Very right. And therefore, we need to make sure that whatever we do, we are strengthening at speed and scale the established NSF and never walk away from that NSF has been doing so well and supercharging ourselves to do even better on that front. But while doing so, what NSF needs to do even better is we cannot, we must not, should not leave any talent behind. There are missing millions of people that are being left behind, that don't have the opportunity to get inspired, nurtured, motivated, and brought to life. Because we all know, particularly in the state of Missouri, you see it firsthand, that talent and ideas are democratized. They are everywhere around us. It is not for a chosen few places. It is not for a chosen few institutions. It's not for a chosen few demographics of socioeconomic demographic. It is everywhere. So therefore, these missing millions of talent that have been left behind cannot be left behind anymore. And NSF has to work harder in terms of advancing those missing millions of talent. And so that's an important imperative that NSF has to take. When I came to NSF and realized the unbelievable possibilities that NSF is making happen. For example, if you look at Google, Google was 2 graduate research fellows of NSF, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, writing a proposal for Digital Libraries Project in 1994. It was funded by NSF in 1999. When they wrote the final report, they said, we founded a company called Google a year earlier, and the rest is history. If you look at Qualcomm, a company which is hundreds of billions of dollars, was a small business innovation research investment of NSF in the 80s to Viterbi. These are untold stories of NSF. We celebrate our Nobel laureates, and we should. At the same time, we ought to also celebrate the amazing innovations that happen that makes possible the industries of the future, industries of tomorrow, the entrepreneurial activities that get spun out. All of these are important because everything contributes to that mission of NSF that we talked about a few minutes ago. So when I came to NSF, I said we have to do this with intentionality and intensity, and this is the time to get it done. And therefore, we launched this new directorate called the Technology Innovation Partnerships Directorate, which is a cross-cutting directorate of NSF, the first new directorate of NSF in 31 years. Because the time is now. We need to be able to hyper-configure those ideas that come from the exemplary directorates and see how working with industry, how working with entrepreneurial ecosystems, how working with the societally important groups that we are working with to essentially extract those ideas and be able to make rapid progress. But that is not alone. That such progress then becomes the basis by which the future innovations happen, and this is a highly symbiotic relationship. So when I came to NSF, I decided that we need to be able to talk about this in a way that people can understand why NSF is unique. NSF is unique. It is not a mission agency in the typical mission sense. It's a broad mission. So I said, let's make it up. Let's call it the DNA of NSF. The DNA of NSF has 2 strands. The one strand of DNA is what NSF is known for, is what folks like Nobel laureate Smith represents, is the curiosity-driven, discovery-based explorations that NSF makes possible. If there is a black hole discovery, there will never be a question about who made that possible. Possibly NSF invested in somebody that really got inspired and made the fundamental discovery. Possibly NSF invested in the LIGO project that made possible the detection of gravitational waves. These are things that you can relate to automatically through what NSF makes possible. And that would be the left-hand side, or this thread of the DNA. The other thread of the DNA, which interweaves and highly symbiotic, highly synergistic, and makes possible unbelievable innovations, is through use-inspired, solutions-focused translations. The translational research that NSF also invests in and makes possible. And these two are not a pipeline, as some people would like you to believe, that this is basic research, this is applied research, this is translational research, this is entrepreneurial firm or some company, intellectual property being licensed by some company. It doesn't work that way, folks. You all know that. Explorations make possible innovations and translations, and so do those innovations and translations feed back to how new discoveries and explorations can be had. This symbiotic relationship is what makes NSF a rich agency. It makes both possible. It in fact not just makes both possible, it makes it in a way that they are mutually synergistic, mutually enriching, and makes possible unbelievable discoveries and innovations at both ends of what we are talking about in terms of NSF. And so, when we talk about the curiosity-driven research, as I said, there are many, many examples of curiosity-driven research. Right here, I'm going to come to Mizzou. I just teased you with that. When you talk about the black holes, this black hole discovery is made possible not by one individual alone, but increasingly by 300 researchers across various disciplines, computer science, astronomy, physics, you name it. All of them working together across the globe, 80 institutions, with 8 different telescopes, Event Horizon Telescope, essentially coming up with this amazing discovery of a black hole in our own galaxy, the Milky Way, which was a recent discovery, with countless hours of computing invested in by NSF as an infrastructure, and that is made possible by people like Katie Bowman. Katie Bowman was the amazing researcher at Caltech. Let me tell you a story of Katie. So do you understand this? I tell people NSF, if I want to describe NSF by one word, NSF is people. NSF makes possible people who are the discoverers, like John. People who are those who then get translated and then go and work in industry, like Larry Page and Sergey Brin, and create companies, and the people like Larry Page and Sergey Brin who are the entrepreneurs. So we have many, many examples of the thousands of them that I find, and I go telling these stories all over the place. If you have a question, ask me. I plant a question, tell me a nice story about an innovator who's funded by NSF, who made possible great things. And talking about people and innovation and great things, right here at Mizzou, we have this amazing explorations being made possible. Mendoza and Mittler, I hope they are here. Mendoza and Mittler, are you here? Yes, there you go. Celebrate them right here, right here. The Bond Life Sciences Center. Right here, we are in this building, the Bond Life Sciences Center, where there are amazing discoveries made. What makes it exciting is, it is discoveries in place. What can happen in Missouri can happen only in Missouri, or in a few places like Missouri, because this is the crucible of innovation in plant sciences, crucible of innovation in agriculture. Why would it not happen here than anywhere else? Obviously, that's place-based innovation. That's what we need to unleash all across our nation, the place-based innovation ideas, exploring mechanisms of how plant senses and responds to iron deficiencies. And that's nice esoteric. What's that got to do with anything with reality, folks? It turns out that it has got the potential to improve human nutrition through the creation of nutrient-dense biofortified foods. Now, they could start several companies here and make this place a really rich environment for entrepreneurial activities. Why not? So there are many, many examples. Let's take AI, for example. When I came to NSF, we were about to launch the AI institutes. I told them only one thing. It's got to be 2 things. One, AI in every place in our nation, not just only the usual suspect places. Because AI inspiration is everywhere and has to be everywhere. In fact, I renamed it as AI in every state. And I questioned every time we had an AI institute, how might we find how many of those states and regions are participating in this? When I say these things, people would tell me, oh, are you then telling us that somehow the gold standard merit review process of NSF has to be lowered in order for us to be able to do this? I say it is very insulting that you would even suggest that. And so I'm going to talk to you about how great ideas everywhere can be energized not only by what happens in University of Missouri and other places, but in other institutions that have those great ideas, and how we can make that possible in a few moments. But let's talk about the AI institutes. And the second thing I said is it cannot and shall not be limited to only NSF investments, as important as they are. We had $100 million every year, 5 institutes, each $20 million scale. But we need to go and hyper partner with every possible agency and industry to be able to scale the number of institutes. So in the first cycle, 2 of those institutes of the 7, 5 plus 2, the 2 of them were fully funded by USDA on AI for agriculture institutes. The first 7 institutes covered 20 states of our nation through various partnerships. The second cycle, I said we need to partner even more. in the 2021 cycle. I'm supposed to point there apparently. Okay? And in this one, we had partnerships with Department of Transportation, Department of Homeland Security, you name it, as well as a consortium of industry, Intel, Accenture, Google, Amazon investing $20 million, so that we had 11 institutes now in the second cycle, 5 funded by NSF, to a total of 11 plus 7, 18 institutes between the two cycles, spanning 40 states of our nation and the District of Columbia. We're about to announce the third cycle of AI institutes in a few weeks. If you note that these AI institutes are fundamental discoveries in AI, and AI of today, you all know, is being made possible by NSF's sustained investments over the last 5 to 6 decades. It didn't just magically happen. 5 to 6 decades of sustained curiosity-driven research investments. In fact, 3 AI lives, if you could call it. AI 1, boom. AI 2, boom. AI 3, really something. So still we are learning those lessons, a lot of lessons we can talk about. But now, in this AI institute, it turns out that one of them has Mizzou involved. It turns out that in this AI Institute for Resilient Agriculture, we have the University of Missouri involved in a partnership with Iowa State University as one of the 8 institutions that partner in this AI Institute for Agriculture. So as you can see, that the researchers here are not just doing only plant-based innovations being part of the AI agricultural system, ecosystems, but actually bringing in the social behavioral sciences component as part of the thinking. And this is an exceedingly important thing as we think about technologies and technological solutions of the future, that social, behavioral, economic sciences, humanities, and the arts are fused and inspired in terms of the technology innovations of the future. And I will talk about that a little bit more. So I'm very delighted to say that this has the University of Missouri participation. On biotechnology, likewise. If you look at the history of biotechnology, the 1990s to 2000s, we had the discovery of the RNAi and gene expression mechanisms. In 2010s, we had the CRISPR and gene editing methodologies. And that is Jennifer Doudna, folks. Jennifer was a career award winner of the National Science Foundation. Now, Jennifer, for example, was an amazing basic discovery researcher who quickly went on to do unbelievable work that resulted in her getting the most prestigious award that NSF makes possible on an annual basis in honor of the first director of NSF, Alan T. Waterman Award. And then, by the way, she also won a small thing called Nobel Prize in 2020 for her CRISPR work, which is redefining. When we talk about basic research, let me give you an example. When we talk about the rapid test for COVID, it was an investment in a bacteria in the Yellowstone in the 60s. Now, people would ask you, if I were to show the title of the project and the abstract of the project, people would say, why would you invest in this same thing in Yellowstone? Are you having some, recreational thinking, or, to go to Yellowstone Park to do your research and field work? That would be the criticism, isn't it? But then many years later, that is what made possible the DNA testing, as well as the vaccine development. And so was CRISPR technology, exceedingly valuable in terms of doing that. This is why when people test the titles or abstracts, I tell them it's important to understand the long-term significance of some of these and give examples of those topics that would have thought of as crazy investments or wasteful investments, but then later on what really happens with those investments is something that NSF is very, very good at, investing early ideas. And so Jennifer Doudna's work today in the University of Missouri, that work is propelling unbelievable innovations around plant gene editing and for resilient high-yield crops. And that, again, is this researcher, James Bircher. I'm sure James is here, Dr. Bircher. If he's not here, he's working really hard on, oh, there he is. The best researchers chose to sit. The best researchers chose to sit in the back, and they said, if this lecture turns out to be boring, I got to do more plant innovations. I'm out of here. So they chose to sit in the back here. So developing a system for plant transformation and gene editing, inserting genes at predetermined spots into the genome of fast-growing corn. And as you can see, it supports robust and resilient crops with higher yield. These are the kinds of innovations, in-place innovations, that the University of Missouri makes possible. this ecosystems make possible. So let's not forget the fact that therefore innovation can be anywhere, and therefore opportunities can be everywhere. I was thrilled this morning to meet the Career Award winners, and then those folks that are putting together this amazing research experiences for undergraduates. I know some of the undergraduate research coordinators are here. You all inspire undergraduate research talent to come in, get touched. I had my share. David Hayden was a good example. How do we get the undergraduate students to come in, high school students to come in, middle school students to come in, and get touched by this amazing STEM inspiration? And what happens of that, you can never believe the outcomes. Like David Hayden is just one example. There are many, many David Haydens in my lab. I can tell you stories about people who came into my lab with a range of abilities. And what they are doing now is redefining computing, redefining what it means for computing and humans to work together in a co-adaptation, co-option mode. So anything is possible anywhere. I'm deeply convinced by that, and convinced that innovation can be anywhere. So what we said, we launched the TIP directorate, and it's all about action, folks, not just launching a directorate. I said, first of all, the directorate has to be launched in 12 months. Don't tell me how it cannot be done. Tell me what it takes to get it done. And within 12 months from that, these are the number of programs out of the TIP directorate. I won't have time to go through each one of them. Every one of them is about how do we touch and inspire talent and make possible amazing innovations, but taking those innovations at scale and with impact. I strongly encourage you to go through some of these investments, but not do it alone. Do it in partnership. How can we make sure that we work with partners like Micron, partners like Intel? How do we make sure that we work with commerce as we think about the hubs of innovation? How does the Research Technology Hub work in partnership with the newly announced regional innovation engines? If innovation is everywhere, why not make it possible everywhere? So we announced the Regional Innovation Engine program. And the Type 1s, I said to people, believe me, you send the Type 1 announcements out and you will see how much of innovation ideas are everywhere. It turns out 700 concept papers were submitted. I said, I don't want long proposals, one-pager concept papers. What is that innovation idea that you have in your region that you think is worthy of investment? 700 of them. And at NSF, we did something very unique. Instead of guarding the 700 of them, I said, let's publish it all on the web, so that people can look at what each other is doing, so that they might hyper-partner, so that they may not know what the others are doing. So we got a couple of hundred proposals in that. We are going to announce I think in 2 weeks from now, you will see the first announcements of the Type 1 awards of innovation. And every state, every territory of the United States had a submission to the Type 1 award. This confirms that this is not a myth. This is a reality that innovation can be anywhere in context. And then we are doing the Type 2s already, which will have the results. And Type 2s are typically $160 million in size, 10-year awards that will happen. And so this is how we are moving the agency forward in terms of strengthening the established NSF. And folks, I'm happy to report with the CHIPS and Science Act that we worked on with the administration and Congress, total bipartisan support of Congress. Often people will come and tell me, are you sure that science has bipartisan support? I tell them, just drop that question. I walked the corridors of the Hill. Just last week, on Tuesday, I was testifying to the Senate Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Committee. On Wednesday, I was testifying to the House Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Committee. If you don't get sleep, you can go and listen to those testimonies. And this Wednesday, I'm going to testify to the House Science Committee and soon to the Senate Commerce Committee. And I keep emphasizing the importance of what support for NSF means. I was pitching to Senator Schmidt today, and he was fantastic, a great supporter. He's a ranking member of the Senate Commerce, Space, Science, Technology Committee. Why NSF investments are important, what it makes possible. It's a responsibility to communicate the impact of NSF investments in basic research terms as well as in applied research terms. And I'm glad to report that if you're watching, in FY23, we got the highest ever increase of NSF budget, $1 billion, 12%, the largest increase of NSF. And now we are in FY24, and I'm proud to say the President has proposed a $11.3 billion budget for NSF. Again, another 18% increase on top of the higher increase that we received. This is the trajectory that we need to be on. We need to commit ourselves to work hard, But that investments, I tell people that even if we were to quadruple the investment of NSF today, it will still not be sufficient for the amount of talent and ideas that are out there that we need to energize. And therefore, what we need to do is to hyper-partner. That we are not a single agency. We are an S&T ecosystem of various agencies working together. I work in partnership with the Department of Commerce, NIST, NOAA, NASA. In fact, the NASA administrator and I testified together in the Senate Commerce Committee on Tuesday. We have to hyper-partner. DOD, DARPA, DITRA, you name it, Department of Energy. We need to hyper-partner. This is a moment that we need to work together as a nation to deliver the science and technology outcomes and deliver in the infrastructure of the future. How do we invest in the infrastructure which we have invested in for so many decades that's made possible amazing discoveries and innovations? Since you all have synthesized it and ready for a quiz, I'll move on to the next slide. Just to prove that, this is the set of concept papers that we received for the RIE. And a convergence accelerator is another excellent example of how do we bring thematic topics around convergence of ideas, convergence of disciplinary sciences, convergence of community, working together with academia and other partners. And right here, we have several convergence accelerator examples all across the nation. And in Track J, at the University of Missouri, guess what? We have the food and nutrition security led by Professor Mahmoud Al-Masri. Professor Mahmoud Al-Masri is here. There you go. So they have, I told you. There is a theme here. There is a theme here. We have better work to do. If his lecture is boring, we are bailing out. We have to do better work. I applaud that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the details of all of this. We launched a new program called Accelerating Research Translation ART. $60 million. $6 million over 4 years, 10 different awards. Those institutions that have got the basic research capacity, needing to build the translational capacities to be able to take them to the real world, how might we support them to the ART program? As you can see, these are, I would call them pilot programs. So as they work, we want to scale fast. We want to get this done everywhere across our nation. Not hesitant to put out the good ideas and see how we can do this. And in order to make sure that opportunities everywhere, we talked about innovation anywhere, in order to do the opportunities everywhere, clearly the great work that is happening in Mizzou, and thanks to Susan. Susan, by the way, I've never had this kind of a reception. I had a brochure fully populated with amazing things that the University of Missouri is doing. Where is the brochure here? I've never had this kind of a thing where all of your pictures are being profiled, and I had to do my homework yesterday. And yesterday was a Sunday, I just couldn't relax. Susan said, well, you better read up before you come. We are the University of Missouri. So, Susan is leading many of the broader impact. She talked about the broader impact activities, and I'm going to go back and talk about the broader impact and the broadening participation. Many programs at NSF, ranging from research programs that you see up there. I won't have time to go to every one of them. Even understand the signs of broadening participation, or broadening participation research centers at HBCUs and HBCU Excellence in Research Awards. How might we ensure that broadening participation is real in terms of bringing the population of students that are yet being shut out of being able to participate in the STEM ecosystem? How might we have educational programs that have specific interventions and therefore help build capacity? And many examples of that, and I'm very proud of the NSF Early Bernice Johnson's Includes program, which has created a phenomenal impact. 3,000 participants networked across many different institutions, named after our amazing leader in the House Science Committee, Chairwoman Eddie Bernice Johnson, who did an amazing job helping NSF advance, and in her honor and in honoring her service, we have named the Includes initiative as part of the Eddie Bernice Johnson initiative. Whether it's research experience for undergraduates, I saw this unbelievably manifested here. The LSAM, amazingly manifested here, right? And so we were talking about this morning. It just seen in every part of this institution, you see exemplars of LSAMP, RUs, Robert Noyce, which is a teacher scholarship program. We are working with a private foundation, Simons Foundation, to expand this even more. Likewise, in partnership with industry, partnership with National Foundation, I talked about this in terms of what we are doing with the Simons Foundation, with their great work that they have done in Math for America all across the state of New York. How do you take that lessons and see how we can broaden this all across our nation? Community College Innovation Challenge, amazing work that is being done by our community college students, and how do we provide them platforms for exercising their innovation capacity? Civic Innovation Challenge is funding universities to be the exemplar of innovation activities and bringing in community partners. Flip the equation, make the community as the place that you fund, and they bring the academic institutions so that we can have real community problems solved rapidly and impactfully. We have several town halls and listening sessions, including this. I have had chancellors and presidents of HBCUs, MSIs, public land grant universities, Association of American Universities, you name it, everywhere. So we need to make sure that we bring all of the folks together to be able to exercise the fullest potential. I always say NSF is a catalyst. NSF is an enabler. NSF is an investor, but the real work happens right here. The innovations happen right here. It is because of all of you that NSF is able to celebrate what can be done through NSF and by NSF. It's your work. And so to celebrate that wherever I go is something that I cherish a lot. And in research infrastructure program, several investments. Let's take the MRI, for example. The mid-scale program is something that we launched recently. The MRI program, again, there is an electron microscope here, if I'm not mistaken, recently in the University of Missouri, if my memory serves me right. But then that's not enough. How do we get the institutions that don't get the chance to participate in the gold standard merit review process of NSF successfully? I asked the question, why is it that institutions of excellence are able to transcend the gold standard merit review process in an outsized manner? Yes, there are great ideas and great people, but great ideas and great people are not the sole property of only the great institutions. They may have a more number of them, but they do exist in other institutions too. How do we not have this self-fulfilling prophecy of this downward spiral? If it is not there, if it is not energized, it never happens there. That cannot continue. I have seen this firsthand, having come from an institution where I was responsible for building the research infrastructure, the research office, which essentially quintupled the research expenditures of that institution from $120 million to $800 million right now without a medical school. It is possible. I'm firmly convinced it is possible. What is required is for the ideas and talent to be able to point it to the right opportunities first, and then being able to take those opportunities and then write successful proposals, pre-review the proposals within campus, help with pre-award, post-award, partnerships, intellectual property. All of the help that typically research offices provides are the sole property of a few institutions in our country, and that's unacceptable, because that's the only way those institutions are able to have an outsized proportion of success. Nothing wrong with that, but that cannot be the only limit. And therefore, this program is called Growing Research Access through Nationally Transformative Equity and Diversity Granted. If NSF is good at something, it's at acronyms. You all know that. I said this has to be launched right away. And I'm pleased to say that this year, in 23, we've invested about $45 million on this. What is this? This is nothing but a virtual research office that is available to any individual or institution that is not in these institutions that have that facility, but yet be able to transcend and get those fantastic ideas realized. And what does it contain? It contains the following components. This virtual research office will have all of these components available for any researcher, anywhere, in a community college, in a high school, in our R2 institution, as well as R1 institutions everywhere across our nation. It has got to become an upward spiral. It cannot be a downward spiral. We cannot leave talent and ideas behind. You know what happens? If you have institutions like that, no faculty member who has great ideas would want to go to those institutions, which means those institutions where students are not touched by those faculty members, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of not the highest quality possible. That is not acceptable, folks. I will not allow that as long as I am the leader of NSF, which happens to be 3 more years. I'm just halfway through my term. I'm convinced that we need to put these fundamental tenets in place as we are looking into the future of how we are going to unleash talent and ideas all across our nation. I know I've taken a lot of time, but it's important for all of you to see, and I want to leave with this thought: the time is now. No time to waste. If you have planned some vacations, If you have planned some time off, I have to go camping, drop all of that. The time is now. We need every one of you. We need your ideas. We need you to inspire more high school students, particularly from those schools that don't get those students a fair share of exposure to exciting things. The time is now. We have to get it done. Every one of you, I'm so happy to see so many of the students here. I looked at them and I'm looking at these undergraduate research projects and I'm like, wow. And that they are winning the graduate research fellowships, wow, second time. And even more greater wow is that the GRFP recipients are not necessarily going to other institutions, but wanting to stay here and do the work right here at the University of Missouri. Wow to all of you. That's what we need more of. We need more of in-place talent, in-place innovation, in-place excellence, like John Smith. We need more of that right here and in every part of our country. Just in the last 2 weeks, my 4-week calendar, I was in Seattle and Spokane upon the invitation of Senator Cantwell. And then with Senator Schumer in Syracuse, putting together the Northeast University Semiconductor Network with 20 universities. And then did the 2 little things of hearings. And then I'm here now. And then I'm going and doing a hearing on Wednesday. And on Thursday, I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to Rhode Island with Senator Jack Reed. I'm going to go everywhere. I've been to Mississippi with Senator Wicker, Senator Graham in South Carolina, in Clemson, Senator Shaheen in New Hampshire, Senator Markey in Boston, Senator Moran twice in Kansas, and so on and on and on. And the president has got up. That means I have to just stop. That's the cue. So folks, I want you to be a partner. I want you to tell me, I took this job. It turns out 80% pay cut. That doesn't matter. I enjoy it every day because this is what we need to do, all of us together as one team. I need your ideas. I need your solutions. I need you to tell me what can make NSF work better for you. NSF is here to serve you. And what can we do to make NSF serve you better? And that starts with partnership with great institutions like University of Missouri and the ecosystem of the state of Missouri. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Director Panchanathan, you mentioned that you've been to all of these places. We're very happy about that. But you don't need to go to Kansas. Just stop in Missouri. But more seriously, isn't it great to have an NSF director that is so optimistic about the future and the importance that he's brought to NSF, which says innovation can happen anywhere, not just on the coast. And I'm glad that you were able to see some of the innovations that are created by our faculty, staff, and students. So let's have a seat, and we're going to have some time for questions. But let me ask the first question, if I may, and that is related to artificial intelligence. And as you know, what that can enable in so many different sectors of our society is truly incredible. But at the same time, there are some that have some concerns on the application of AI. So how does the NSF plan to navigate the challenges and the opportunities?
Excellent question, Professor Choi. You know, if you look at, I told you that AI of today is made possible by the unbelievable innovations that happened in the last 5 to 6 decades of NSF's investment. By the way, NSF happens to be the largest non-defense, 80% of computing research is invested by NSF, the non-defense funding of it. But what we did not do is we did not hyper-partner with the crown jewel of NSF, which is the Social Behavioral Economic Sciences Directorate. I have started to say, since coming in, that SBE Directorate is not only a vertical in terms of unbelievable innovations that happen in disciplinary sciences, but SBE is a horizontal thread that interweaves everything that happens, which means trust, privacy, security, bias, responsibility, and a whole lot more of those activities have to be threaded in the design of the technology and not try to put band-aids after the fact. So what NSF is doing is in every AI institutes, we have a responsibility-based thinking embedded in, ethics plan embedded in, so that when we are training the students of the future, the ideas of the future, that these become part of the thought process. And that the lessons that we have learned from AI, we need to be proactively addressing them in other technology areas so that the SBE becomes a significant component of that. That's the first thing that we are doing in terms of reprogramming our thinking. NSF is not anymore the vertical directorates, pillars, but essentially fused entities. Yes, we advance amazing discoveries in the disciplinary sciences, physics, astronomy, chemistry, biology, computing, engineering, and so on, but it also at the intersection of those. And it's a great example of your institution, where you're really redefining how people work together across disciplines. I heard many of those. And when those institutions are configuring that way, the investors should also make sure that we're empowering that configuration. And so that's what NSF is doing to make sure that we are addressing that. As I said, if you don't have time, you can listen to my answer to one of the questions that was asked by one of the House members at the end of my House testimony about AI and the fact that there's a talk about whether we should pause and things of that nature. I addressed that also. So
that's great. That's great. May I ask if we can get the lights in the room up? And if you have a question, please raise your hand. We have a mic that will go to you. So let's get the lights up in the room. And who would like to ask the first question?
Yeah.
Hold on.
Hi there. So in the beginning, you described this room and wider society as energized, inspired, empowered, and motivated. And I'm wondering, because I use those words as well, but I always use educated as well. And I wondered if you purposefully left out educated because your philosophy on education is for people to find their own solution. And I'm just interested to hear a little bit more of your philosophy about educating people, especially in terms of the missing millions that potentially have a lot to teach us, but so far we have been all about what can we do for you poor people that need help, rather than find your own solutions, right?
No, if I had given the impression that somehow finding your own solution is the only thing that I talked about, not emphasizing education, I take that back. I have learning as a thread, not only education, learning as a thread of how we are looking at everything, and therefore empowering the learning process. So when I talked about teacher training, if you want good STEM-inspired kids, you need good STEM-inspired teachers. So we're working on that, and you're doing a great job in terms of that work that you're doing here right at the University of Missouri. And then if you want good learning outcomes that comes out of community colleges and tribal colleges and R2 institutions, we need hyper partnership with institutions like University of Missouri, with those institutions, so those students don't get to see only what they can see in those institutions, as good as they are, but they're also connected to the amazing innovators and discoverers like John Smith and others. Because if students only in University of Missouri have the chance, and the other students don't have the chance, that will be a missed opportunity. So absolutely learning, but let's not forget the fact that what we have also learned from our COVID moment is that learning happens everywhere, and learning can happen everywhere. How to use the technology as not a substitute for teachers, but as an augmentation and enrichment of the teaching process and learning process. So NSF is investing on all of those areas too.
Yes, back there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Someone who one of many hats in my career I've worn was energy economist and financial analyst for the electric power sector. I'm very aware of the role the federal government has played historically in projects such as the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Bonneville Power Administration, big infrastructure investments in, that were largely out of the Depression, the Great Deal, that transitioned, both the economy and the electric grid into a modern system. Now we're in another energy transition phase. No one knows exactly where, the puck will go in this. I am very much an advocate of hydrogen power. With, and hydrogen, you can also make ammonia, methanol. There are many other, fuels, both fuel storage and fuel, energy transfer. Sorry.
So may I ask if you can get to your question? Yes.
What is how will the federal government interplay with the private sector and academia in building the next, how will this bureaucracy, the federal machine, play a role in getting us to our next fuel infrastructure?
That's a great question. So if you recall, I talked about the partnerships. So let me address specifically your question. the partnership between, as you know, Department of Energy has got a number of investments that they're making in the future hydrogen economy. NSF is investing in the regional innovation engines, which we expect to also have the hydrogen component built in as part of the innovation activities, quite likely, because we're also investing in climate and clean energy, but synchronizing with the Department of Energy. But let's not forget the fact that Commerce is building the regional technology hubs. So as I said, the Commerce Secretary and I, we knew each other even before when she was the governor of Rhode Island. I helped build the innovation campus. So I told her, Secretary Raimondo, that when she came in, that our regional innovation engines and regional technology hub should work like that. Okay, so that we are all tightly synchronized. We are not doing our individual things, but the sum total, as is always said, can be much larger than the sum of the parts. So we are working with that understanding, and hydrogen is a clear focus area. As you know, the president has talked about that in his remarks, about the future of the energy economy. So absolutely, there's a thinking, and if there are any, you talked about bureaucracy, and I hope that the bureaucracy does not, as you describe it, does not become a challenge to realizing good ideas and good ecosystems of innovation. So if there's anything that we can do, don't hesitate to write to either me or the Secretary of Energy or Secretary of Commerce or all of the above to see what your ideas are there. Because I always tell people, I had this rule, when people say that I have a problem, I say, how about 3 solutions? Because you have thought about the problem more than anybody else, and you clearly have, right? So you have some solution pathways in mind. So we, to see if such solutions can be implemented is something that we can think about. Bring it on. Bring on good solutions. Yeah.
One more question. Is there a student that would like to ask a question?
I would love that.
Yeah, I would love that too. We're all students of life, but yes, students that pay tuition. Thank you.
We are all students, but our learning potential is decreasing exponentially.
Yes. Is there a question back there? Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christian Bertel. I'm a student nurse over at the Sinclair School of Nursing. And Your Honor, I just had a question. I was really intrigued when you mentioned healthcare in your presentation. And I was just wondering if you could maybe elaborate in some of the ways that we would see the NSF collaborating with different healthcare organizations and with even maybe specifically nursing organizations where I'd see I guess, collaborations and what kind of projects? I know it's kind of a broad question, but what do you got?
Okay, great. What do you got? It turns out that the director does not hand out money, although our budget is $10 billion. Apparently, I was told right day one when I got into the job that I could write checks, I thought. But I was told, no. So, do you want this job or not? So, just kidding. So, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. Let me tell you from my previous role that I had, the nursing profession is such an honorable profession, and so much innovations that happen right at the bedside is because of nurses. We had a great nursing school in the institution that I came from. Believe it or not, the entrepreneurial pathways, we had a specific program for the College of Nursing, because if you look at the Ivy poll and the innovations that they come up with, it's unbelievable, right? So to answer your question, first of all, we are partnering with NIH, of course, Health and Human Services at large, and the ARPA-H director, Renee, she's a phenomenal person. She's a dear friend, and we are working together so that the ARPA-H is enabled by what NSF is also investing in, and we are hyper-partnering, so that we are co-creating things and making possible co-creation of things. So we partner, but let's make sure that the nursing innovations are exercised through the many programs that emphasize innovation at NSF. I don't know how many of you know, the Small Business Innovation Research Program was actually incubated by NSF. SBIR was founded by NSF in the 70s. Now it's part of every agency. I-Core was founded by NSF. Now it's part of every agency. And so is RIE. So take advantage of all the programs, I-Core, SBIR, STTR, and other programs of SBIR, STTR in other agencies, and see how you can bring your ideas to life. I hope I answered your question. You're welcome.
That's great. So, Director Panchanathan, if I can ask you to stand right over here, please. And if I can ask our board chair, Michael Williams, and curator, Robin Wendiker, vice chair, to come on up, and also our Nobel laureate, Dr. Smith, please come on up.
Wonderful to meet you.
And
Thanks for all you're doing here.
we're coming to the end of the presentation, but I was sitting over there watching Dr. Panchanathan sprinting back and forth.
Because I know
And I got a text
from
from our coach, Eli Drinkwitz. He said he needs a new tailback. And so can we get him into the transfer portal right away? But in recognition of his many, many contributions, we have a very special gift that the chair will present. If you can present him with this, Chair Williams.
Oh, wow.
It's a tailback uniform.
Holy.
Let's take a picture. Everyone,
The problem is
Yes.
that the moment I take it home, my son, who is a lover of sports, is going to grab it. That's what's going to happen.
we'll send another
No, thank
one.
you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much. It's
you.
really awesome. It's very kind of you.
You were.
Go Mizzou.
Go Mizzou.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Thank you, everyone. The director is going to be here. If you want
I'll
to
give you
take
my card.
pictures with the director, please come on up. He loves meeting with students, faculty, and staff. So feel free. Please come on up. Thank you.